Hello, all you freedom-loving people. Welcome to another episode of Front Page International. I'm your host, Scott Cameron Goulet. President Trump is going on the offensive against his former attorney, Michael Cohen, who he is suing for $500 million in damages for breaching their attorney-client relationship. Elon Musk also went on the offensive against a BBC reporter who tried to bait Musk into agreeing that hate speech was on the rise on Twitter. Another media outlet is also not so happy with Elon Musk after Twitter labeled it as state-affiliated media. The emergency broadcast system, the EBS, went off in Japan last night after North Korea apparently fired a ballistic missile that fell into the sea, which is east of North Korea, after Macron returned from Beijing. He is now flip-flopping over his stance regarding China and Taiwan, and after 7 years, Iran's embassy gate in Saudi Arabia reopened. Okay, let's get into it. President Trump filed a civil lawsuit against Michael Cohen on Wednesday for more than $500 million in damages, and he requested a jury trial. The lawsuit claims that Cohen breached his attorney-client relationship with President Trump, and he enriched himself unfairly and more. Cohen was Trump's attorney from 2006 to 2018, and he was a vice president of the Trump Organization. A Trump spokesperson wrote in a statement that the lawsuit and the many wrongdoings by Michael Cohen, a convicted felon, stand for themselves and have been admitted to by Cohen himself through his falsehood-filled books, podcasts, and constant media appearances. The lawsuit notes that their relationship consisted of multiple breaches of fiduciary duty, unjust enrichment, conversion, and breaches of contract, as well as spreading falsehoods about President Trump that would likely be embarrassing or detrimental. While the civil lawsuit is legally unrelated to the Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg's case against President Trump, Cohen's public statements about the case that led to Bragg's indictment are cited as supporting evidence. Cohen was convicted of federal campaign finance violations in 2018 in connection with arrangements for payments to Stormy Daniels and another woman who claimed to have had affairs with President Trump. Cohen served a prison sentence from May 2019 to July 2020 for these charges. President Trump's filing states that after the relationship between President Trump and Cohen ended, Cohen committed an onslaught of fiduciary and contractual breaches against Trump by making numerous inflammatory and false statements about President Trump. For example, Cohen breached his duties when he revealed President Trump's confidences, and he spread falsehoods about President Trump via public statements, including the publication of 2 books, a podcast series, and innumerable mainstream media appearances. The complaint states that Cohen's publishing of these 2 books was a part of wrongful actions that were intentional, calculated, malicious, and motivated by his desire to acquire fame, attention, notoriety, and wealth. Also, the lawsuit alleges that Cohen's podcast, Mea Culpa, which Cohen launched in September of 2020, has revealed confidential information that was gleaned by nature of his prior attorney-client relationship with President Trump, and it has information about President Trump's personal and private life. In 4 episodes, Cohen invited Stormy Daniels onto his podcast, and he discussed with Stormy her purported interaction with President Trump. In March of 2023, Cohen re-aired one of those episodes around the time that he testified to the grand jury that later indicted President Trump. Elon Musk blasted a BBC reporter on Tuesday for failing to cite specific examples of hate speech on Twitter during a hurriedly arranged interview. During their discussion regarding looming layoffs and Musk's painful journey following his Twitter acquisition last year, the BBC reporter James Clayton challenged Musk about allegations that he doesn't have enough staff to police hate speech. Clayton tried baiting Musk by saying there was a rise of hate speech on Twitter. In response, Musk asked, "What hate speech are you talking about?" Musk added, "I mean, you use Twitter. Do you see a rise in hate speech? Just a personal anecdote? I don't." Yet, When Clayton responded that he saw more hate speech on Twitter, Musk then challenged him again to give just one example. But the reporter could not come up with even one example. Clayton responded, "I don't actually use that feed anymore because I just don't particularly like it." Musk said, "I'm asking for one example and you can't give a single one." "Then I say, sir, you don't know what you're talking about." Musk added, "You cannot give me a single example of hateful content, not even one tweet, and yet you claimed that hateful content was high. That is false. You just lied." Clayton then pointed the finger at Musk, claiming that he said others have reported seeing a rise in hate speech, but not that he had seen it himself. Musk snapped back, saying, "You literally said you experienced more hateful content and then you couldn't name a single example. That's absurd." According to Clayton, the rise in hate speech is due to content that would solicit a reaction, something that is slightly racist or slightly sexist. Musk again challenged him and asked, "So you think if something is slightly sexist, it should be banned? Is that what you're saying?" Clayton replied, "No, I'm not saying anything." Earlier this year, Twitter was warned by the European Union that it must hire more content moderation staff in order to comply with the Digital Services Act. In addition, last week, Germany's Federal Office of Justice threatened Twitter with a $55 million fine for failing to adequately handle illegal content such as hate speech, personal threats, defamation, and anti-Semitism. Furthermore, Twitter is being sued by a human rights group called Hate Aid and the European Union of Jewish Students. The lawsuit claims that Twitter failed to remove 6 posts that denied the Holocaust. Too many things are going on with Twitter these days. Before we move on to the National Public Radio that quit Twitter recently, I want to ask you if you know that Twitter no longer exists. But why is this? And what does this mean? We have a short video explaining this on our front page channel. I'll leave the link in the description below. Okay, let's get back into it. And in other news related to Twitter, National Public Radio, NPR, left Twitter after NPR was labeled as state-affiliated media on Twitter. NPR is now labeled as government-funded media. NPR posted several simultaneous Twitter posts notifying users that they can download the NPR app, sign up for the newsletter, and access it on other social media platforms like Facebook or TikTok. However, as of Wednesday morning, NPR's account was still online, and it's not clear if NPR will delete its account or if they will simply not post on Twitter anymore. NPR, which has been criticized for its strong left-wing bias over the years, published an article to portray itself as the first major news organization to go silent on the social media platform. NPR officials explained that the reason for the decision to leave Twitter is because it labeled the broadcaster as state-affiliated media, which is similar to the Chinese Communist Party mouthpieces like Xinhua or CCTV, or to Russian-backed outlets like RT and Sputnik News. John Lansing, the CEO of NPR, noted that even if Twitter dropped the government-funded label, it's not clear if NPR would return to Twitter in the near future. Lansing said, "I would need some time to understand whether Twitter can be trusted again." As mentioned in the article, NPR staffers and reporters are free to leave Twitter or not, although it's not clear if any of them had done so as of Wednesday morning. In an interview with NPR earlier this week, Elon Musk said that he was told that NPR is independent from the federal government, so the state-affiliated media label may not have been accurate. In recent years, a debate has arisen over how much federal funding NPR actually receives. Although NPR claims that only about 13% of taxpayer dollars go to the outlet, some claim that it may be much higher and it may be hidden behind grants. However, NPR has disputed such claims. The U.S. government primarily funded NPR decades ago, but in the 1980s there was a change to its financial structure. According to a conservative group called Influence Watch. NPR receives about 1% of its budget from the federal government and about 10% from state, federal agencies, and from local governments. Late on Wednesday, North Korea fired a ballistic missile over northern Japan, which sparked a panic. The missile launch prompted Japan's government-run EBS, or Emergency Broadcasting System, called J-Alert in order to warn millions of residents on the northern island of Hokkaido to evacuate immediately and to take immediate cover in a building or to go underground. According to the EBS, the missile was expected to land around 8 a.m. in Japan time. However, the Japanese government soon lifted the order. They said that the warning system had predicted the missile's fall erroneously. Japan's Coast Guard said that the missile fell into the sea, which is east of North Korea. According to South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff, South Korea's military boosted its surveillance posture and it maintains a firm readiness in close coordination with the United States. The launch came after North Korea claimed that it had tested a nuclear-capable underwater attack drone. South Korea and the United States have recently held joint military exercises, which North Korea has criticized the exercises as proof of U.S. hostility against North Korea. In response to joint military exercises, North Korea has launched about 30 missiles since the beginning of this year. However, South Korea and U.S. officials have denied that the drills are defensive and they have no intention of invading North Korea. U.S. and South Korea claim that they arranged the exercises to respond to North Korea's growing nuclear and missile threats. North Korea, in contrast, claims the U.S.-South Korea joint military exercises forced it to develop nuclear weapons to deal with military threats. Japan announced that it will hold three-way defense talks with the United States and South Korea on Friday in Washington in order to discuss regional issues. This will include North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. After Emmanuel Macron returned from Beijing, he tried to reassure allies that his policy on China and Taiwan remains unchanged. However, diplomats and analysts believe that his remarks had undermined the European Union's efforts to develop a coherent policy. Over the weekend, Macron returned from a 3-day visit to China, where he received a warm welcome from Xi Jinping. China also began a military exercise around Taiwan on Saturday in response to Taiwan's president's meeting with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy the previous week. Later on Sunday, Macron suggested that Europe had no interest in escalating the crisis over Taiwan and that they should follow a strategy that is independent from both U.S. and China. However, days after his suggestion, Macron appeared alongside the Dutch Prime Minister to state that his policy toward Taiwan remained unchanged and that his goal was to preserve EU unity with respect to China. According to the Financial Times, many analysts and diplomats believe that Macron's remarks have created an uncertainty over the EU's policy on China. After multiple independent trips by European leaders to Beijing in recent months, the EU has struggled to formulate a coherent China position. Some of those that traveled alone to China have included Olaf Scholz, the German Chancellor. Olaf is also eager to preserve close relations with China, like Macron. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, as well as European Council President Charles Michel, have also visited China recently. Macron was also criticized for releasing a positive video documenting his trip to China, in which there was no mention of Beijing's military saber-rattling or their oppression of Uyghurs in Xinjiang province. There is a sharp contrast between the film and the president of the European Commission, von der Leyen's recent warning that Xi Jinping's interaction with Vladimir Putin over the war in Ukraine would be a determining factor for EU-China relations. Michel Duclos, who is a former high-ranking French diplomat and who is now at the Institut Montaigne, said that Macron was making similar mistakes in his diplomatic push with Xi Jinping as he did with Putin before Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Duclos added that Macron's independent diplomatic moves ended up causing allies to lose trust in France. Duclos said the president is again setting Europe back and not helping it. For the first time in 7 years, the Iranian embassy's main gate in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, has reopened for inspection by an Iranian delegation. In addition, Iran's president, Ibrahim Raisi, has been invited to Saudi Arabia in what would be the first visit of its kind since 1999. Saudi Arabia broke off relations with Iran in 2016 after Iranian protesters attacked Saudi diplomatic missions following the execution of a Saudi Shiite leader. The Saudi embassy in Iran was attacked. Its staff were evacuated, and the Saudis then gave Iran's diplomats in Saudi Arabia 48 hours to leave. Earlier this month, China brokered an agreement that Iran and Saudi Arabia would reestablish ties, even though both countries have backed opposing sides in conflicts around the Middle East. A sensation arose when Wang Yi, the director of the Chinese Communist Party's Foreign Affairs Commission, announced on March 10th that secret talks between Iran and Saudi Arabia led to the reopening of embassies in Beijing. Chinese media proclaimed that this demonstrated that the Gulf was no longer in the United States' exclusive sphere of influence. The agreement needed a global sponsor of China's stature and credibility with various regional countries in order to be reached. The agreement does represent a victory for China's diplomacy in an area from where it buys 45% of its oil imports that are worth over $120 billion, and to where it exports and infrastructure and high-tech investment are growing significantly. While China's naval presence in the Arabian Sea has been mainly for anti-piracy patrol, the U.S. believes that the Gulf is a focus area for Chinese military planners. In 2021, the U.S. interceded with the United Arab Emirates in order to stop China's work on an allegedly secret facility at the Khalifa port where China has built container terminals. The U.S. will now not have much success in halting the burgeoning ties between China and Saudi Arabia. And that's a wrap for this episode. Thank you so much for your support of Front Page and Front Page International. Please remember that every like, comment, and share helps more people to see the truth. If you haven't already, please subscribe. And if you have already subscribed, we thank you. But please double check to make sure that you are still subscribed, because some of our audience have reported that they're somehow unsubscribed without their knowledge. Okay, this is our show for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you like what you heard today, please don't forget to like this video and share it with your friends and family, because everybody deserves to know the truth. Again, thank you for watching Front Page, and we'll see you next time.